I wanted to look exactly like the kind of woman Daniel had described, simple and ordinary. Before leaving, I looked at a picture of my late husband on my shelf. He used to say, "People's true colors show when they think you can't help them." I smiled softly. "Let's find out if that's still true," I whispered. I called a cab and gave the driver the address, Maison LeBlanc. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Ironically, I was one of the silent investors in that very place. When we arrived, I looked through the glass doors. The lights were soft, the waiters wore tuxedos, and everything smelled like money. I walked inside slowly. The hostess gave me a polite smile. But I saw the quick scan of her eyes. From my dress to my shoes, the kind of look people give when they're trying not to judge. "I'm here to meet Daniel Parker," I said. "He has a reservation." She nodded and led me through the dining area. People were laughing softly, holding wine glasses, and whispering over plates that cost more than most people's rent. At the back of the restaurant, I saw my son. He stood up as I approached. Sitting next to him was Clara. And across from her were her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. Daniel gave me a small smile, the kind that looked forced. "Hey Mom, glad you made it." "Of course," I said, and smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet everyone." Clara's mother looked me over, her eyes taking in every detail of my outfit. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "So nice to meet you, Mrs. Parker. Daniel told us you work in an office." I nodded. "That's right. Been working for years now." Her husband gave a short nod. The kind people give when they're pretending to be polite. Clara kept glancing at Daniel, like she was worried about how I looked. I sat down quietly. The waiter handed out menus. Everyone started talking about travel, luxury, and expensive things. I stayed quiet, listening. When the waiter returned, Mrs. Lewis ordered an expensive wine. I just asked for water. The air at the table was thick with judgment. I could feel it. They were polite on the surface, but their eyes said everything. Still, I stayed calm. I smiled. I observed. Because I knew something they didn't. I sat quietly at that long, shiny table while everyone else spoke like they were performing on stage. The lights were soft, the music was slow, and the waiter moved like he was gliding on air. It was the kind of place where people whispered to feel important. Daniel looked nervous. He kept glancing at me and then at Clara's parents, like he was afraid I might say something that didn't sound rich enough. I just smiled and pretended not to notice. Mrs. Lewis started the small talk. "So, Mrs. Parker, Daniel tells us you work in an office. That must be hard at your age." Her voice was sweet, but her words carried a sting. I nodded. "Yes, it's simple work, but it keeps me busy." She tilted her head. "That's good. Not everyone can stay employed these days." My son invited me to dinner with his wife's parents. They thought I was poor, uneducated, someone to be pitied. So I decided to give them exactly what they expected. I wore my oldest dress, kept quiet, and smiled through their insults. But what they didn't know was that the restaurant they were sitting in belonged to me. That night, they judged the wrong woman. My name is Helen Parker. I am 55 years old, and I have spent most of my life living quietly. To everyone around me, I am just another middle-aged woman who works in an office and lives a simple life. What no one knows is that I own one of the most successful restaurant chains in the city. I never told anyone, not even my son, Daniel. He has always seen me cooking at home, wearing old clothes, and driving a small car. He never asked how I managed everything alone. Maybe he just assumed I lived paycheck to paycheck. And I never corrected him. I didn't need to. I believe that real success doesn't have to be loud. I grew up watching people destroy themselves trying to prove something. I promised myself I'd never do that. But that belief was tested one Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. It was Daniel. He rarely called me just to talk. I could tell from his voice that something was different. "Hey Mom," he said, sounding nervous. "Clara's parents are in town. We're having dinner on Saturday. They'd like to meet you. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Of course, I'd love to come. He paused for a few seconds and said, "It's a nice place, Mom. Just so you know." That sentence stayed with me. I knew what he meant. I could hear the hesitation in his tone, like he was preparing me not to embarrass him. So I asked, "Do they know what I do?" He cleared his throat and said, "Yeah. I told them you work in an office, that you live simply." He didn't sound proud. He sounded careful. I could feel something heavy press against my chest. My own son was worried about how I might look in front of his wife's rich family. I didn't argue. I just said, "All right, Daniel, I'll be there." After I hung up, I sat in silence. I looked around my small living room, the same one I'd kept for years. The old furniture, the same curtains, the same walls. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. And in that quiet moment, I made a decision. If Daniel and his in-laws believed I was a poor, simple woman, then that's exactly who I would be. I would give them what they expected to see. Not because I wanted to please them, but because I wanted to see how they treated someone who had nothing to offer. Saturday came faster than I expected. I woke up early and stood in front of my closet. I had two choices. One was a black dress I usually wore to formal business dinners. The other was an old gray dress I hadn't touched in years. It was loose, wrinkled, and made me look tired. I picked the gray dress. I tied my hair back in a plain ponytail and wore my old shoes. No makeup, no jewelry. Especially when they're older. Clara laughed softly, trying to hide it behind her glass. Daniel didn't say a word. I just smiled. I had been in boardrooms full of arrogant men who tried to talk down to me. Compared to that, this was nothing. Mr. Lewis joined in. "So, you work for someone else. I mean, you're not in management or anything, right?" I said gently, "No, not management." That was technically true. I didn't work for anyone. I hired people like him. He chuckled and leaned back. "Ah, that's fine. Honest work is honest work." Then he turned to Daniel. "You're lucky, son. It's good that Clara married someone ambitious. You'll be able to take care of your mother." Daniel smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, that's the plan." That line cut deeper than they knew. For a moment, I felt something inside me twist. I had built a business empire without ever needing help. I had raised Daniel alone after his father died, worked day and night, sacrificed everything to make sure he had an education. And now, here I was, listening to strangers say my son would take care of me. But I stayed calm. The waiter returned with the food. The plates looked like art, small, decorated, and overpriced. I watched Mrs. Lewis wave her hand dramatically. "I just love fine dining," she said. "We could never eat like this back home. Everything there feels so basic." She glanced at me while saying it. I smiled again. "Yes, it's a beautiful place." When the waiter poured my water, Mrs. Lewis said, "You know, Daniel mentioned you don't usually go out much. I'm glad you're getting this experience." That word again, experience, as if I was a poor woman seeing a restaurant for the first time. I sipped my water and said, "Yes, it's quite an experience." Inside, I felt a quiet burn of amusement. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was watching them, observing every look, every tone, every careless laugh. Because this wasn't dinner anymore. It was a test. Halfway through the meal, Clara's mother leaned closer to Daniel. "Your mom is sweet," she whispered, but loud enough for me to hear. "It's nice that she's humble. Not everyone can fit in different social circles." Daniel smiled politely. Then she looked at me and said, "You must be very proud of Daniel. He's doing well for himself. I'm sure it's a relief for you." I nodded. "Yes, I'm proud of him." In my mind, I remembered every night I spent awake doing paperwork. Every time I skipped dinner to pay for his school. Every contract I signed that paid for his future. But he never knew. And now, here he was, watching his wife's family treat me like a charity case. The silence after her comment hung heavy. Then the waiter came back to ask if we wanted dessert. Mrs. Lewis smiled. Of course. Let's celebrate family. I could almost laugh. Family. They didn't even know who I really was. The waiter brought dessert. A small chocolate cake with gold flakes on top. Mrs. Lewis took a photo of it. Like it was treasure. I sat back, listening to their talk about vacations, stocks, and expensive handbags. Not once did anyone ask me anything personal. They didn't care who I was. They only cared who I wasn't. When the waiter placed the final check at the end of the meal, Daniel immediately reached for it. But before he could, Mrs. Lewis said, "Oh no, let us take care of it. It's our treat." Then she glanced at me and added softly, "Unless you want to split, Mrs. Parker." Her tone was sharp behind the smile. She wanted to see my reaction. I looked at her calmly and said, "No, please. I insist you go ahead." She smiled like she had won something. I watched her hand over her card with pride. But what she didn't know was that her payment, her tip, her entire bill would still go into my business account the next morning. As they paid, I excused myself and went to the restroom. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Simple dress, tired face, calm eyes. I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. Curious to see how far their arrogance would go. That was the moment I decided they would learn who I truly was, but not tonight. Their lesson would come quietly, in a way they would never forget. I walked behind Marcus and Clara as we entered the dining room. The place was bright, filled with soft yellow light. A long wooden table was set with shining glasses, plates, and candles. It looked like something out of a magazine. Clara's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were already seated. Both of them stood as we walked in. Her father gave me a short smile. Her mother gave me the kind of look that scans someone from head to toe and makes silent judgments. "Mom, Dad, this is my mother, Helen," Clara said. "Nice to meet you," Mrs. Thompson said. Her voice was polite but cold. Her eyes stopped at my simple blue dress, the one I wore on purpose. "Marcus has told us a lot about you." I smiled and sat down quietly. The waiter filled our glasses with water. The conversation started slowly. Clara's father talked about his company, a chain of small businesses around the city. He seemed proud of it. Marcus talked about his new job. I listened, nodding, letting them believe I was just a quiet, old-fashioned woman. "So, Helen," Mrs. Thompson asked after a while. "Marcus mentioned you live a very simple life. Do you still work?" "Not really," I said. "I manage a small place nearby. It keeps me busy." "A small place. How nice," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "It's good to have hobbies at your age." Clara laughed softly. "Mom, she means her cafe or something like that." I smiled again, calm and steady. Inside, I could feel the familiar warmth of quiet anger building. But I hid it under my smile. The food came. Appetizers first, shrimp cocktail, Caesar salad, and bread. Everything smelled amazing, and I instantly recognized the recipe. The shrimp sauce, the herbs, they were exactly like the ones from my restaurant. But I stayed silent. "Isn't the food amazing?" Clara said. "This restaurant is one of the best in the city. Their owner is some genius woman, I heard. Built everything from scratch." "Really?" I said, pretending to be curious. "Do you know her name?" "No idea," Marcus said. "But the manager said she's old now and rarely visits." I nodded and took a bite of the salad I had designed years ago. It was surreal, sitting there, eating my own creation. While people talked about me as if I was some stranger, every flavor reminded me of the nights I spent perfecting those recipes. The long hours, the sweat, the dreams. Mr. Thompson leaned back and looked at me. "So, Helen, Marcus tells me you've always been very frugal. That's a good habit. I hope he gets that from you." "He does," I said softly. "He's always been careful about money." "Good," he said. In today's world, not everyone can live simply. Mrs. Thompson smiled. Clara will need that influence, I suppose. She likes nice things, don't you, dear? Clara blushed and said, well, yes, but everyone likes nice things. Their laughter echoed across the table. I smiled politely, taking another sip of water. Every sentence was a test, a small jab covered in politeness. They thought I didn't belong here. They thought I was an old poor woman who got lucky with a son like Marcus. But what they didn't know was that the very place they were sitting in was mine. Every chair, every light, every recipe. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself and went to the restroom. I needed a moment to breathe. In the mirror, I looked at my reflection.com, composed, unbothered. Years of business had taught me one thing. Silence can be the most powerful reply. When I came back, I noticed a young waiter standing nervously near the table. He looked new. He was the same boy I had interviewed last week, though none of them knew that. Clara was saying, excuse me, could we get more bread, please? The waiter nodded quickly, and almost tripped on his way back. Mrs. Thompson shook her head. These staff are so careless these days, she whispered to Clara, not realizing I could hear. I watched quietly. A moment later, the restaurant manager, an older woman named Lisa, came to the table to apologize for the delay. She greeted me with a warm smile before turning to the others. I hope everything is to your satisfaction tonight, she said. Everything's fine, Marcus said. The food's great. Lisa smiled again, but her eyes met mine. It was a look of respect, the kind that comes only from knowing the truth. I gave her a small nod. Then Mrs. Thompson said, you should really train your staff better. That waiter nearly spilled water on us. Lisa stayed calm. I'll handle it, ma'am. Thank you for your feedback. She walked away quietly, but I could see her pride in how she didn't bend too much. I sat back, taking in the moment. This was what silent revenge looked like, not shouting, not revealing anything, just watching as people exposed themselves. Clara's father raised his glass. To family, he said. Everyone followed. I lifted mine too. To family, I repeated. The dinner ended with dessert chocolate soup, one of my first signature items. As I took the first spoonful, Marcus said, Mom, you should try opening a small food stall or something. You've always loved cooking. I looked at him and smiled. Maybe one day, I said. As we stood to leave, the waiter brought the bill. Marcus reached for it, but Lisa stepped forward quickly. Oh no, sir. The bill is taken care of tonight. Marcus looked confused. By who? Lisa glanced at me and said softly, by the house, sir. Clara smiled proudly. See? Marcus, you're always lucky wherever you go. I just nodded, holding my bag. Walking out slowly, as the truth stayed behind, quiet, untouched, powerful. Outside, the night air was cool. The streetlights shimmered against the restaurant's glass doors. Marcus hugged me before leaving. Clara's mother said, it was lovely meeting you, Helen. I smiled. The pleasure was mine. As they drove away, I turned back toward the restaurant, my restaurant. And for the first time that night, I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. The real revenge wasn't in telling them who I was. It was in watching them enjoy everything they thought they owned, when in truth, it all belonged to me. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was just breaking through my bedroom window, painting everything in soft gold. I sat up and reached for my phone. There was a message from Marcus. Thanks for coming last night, Mom. Clara's parents liked you. I smiled at the screen. I could almost hear his voice, polite and distant, still unaware of what the night really meant. I made coffee and stepped into my backyard. The air smelled like rain from the night before. I looked at the small herbs growing near the fence. These were the same herbs I had once grown for my restaurant, before it became too big for my backyard garden. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how far I had come. There was a time when I worked double shifts. cleaning floors and washing dishes in other people's restaurants. I used to dream of owning one of my own. I worked, saved, and built it brick by brick. And when it finally became successful, I chose to stay behind the curtain. I let my manager handle the front. I wanted peace, not praise. But last night reminded me why I chose silence. People like the Thompsons only see what's in front of them: clothes, manners, accents. They never look deeper. At noon, I got a call from Lisa, the manager. "Everything went well last night," she said. But I have to admit, it was hard not to laugh when Mrs. Thompson started complaining about the service. I chuckled softly. "You handled it perfectly. Thank you." She also left a note. Lisa continued. She wrote, "Food was excellent, but service needs improvement. I've saved it if you want to see it." "Keep it," I said. "It might be a good reminder for our training board." We both laughed. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a while. I thought about Marcus and Clara. Maybe someday they'd find out. Maybe not. But I didn't need them to. Revenge didn't always mean destroying someone. Sometimes it meant letting people live in their own small box of assumptions, while you quietly stood outside, free and content. Later that evening, Marcus called again. "Mom, Clara's parents really liked the restaurant. They said we should go there again." "That's nice," I said. "Yeah," he continued. "Clara's dad even said he might want to meet the owner someday. Maybe discuss business ideas." I smiled. Tell him that would be an interesting meeting. He didn't understand what I meant, and I didn't explain. Some truths are better left to time. A few days passed. Life went back to its usual rhythm. I spent mornings at the restaurant office, reviewing invoices and tasting new dishes, then evenings, reading or cooking simple meals at home. One afternoon, as I was checking the new menu designs, I saw Marcus and Clara walk into the restaurant. I watched them from the upper balcony window, where the tinted glass made it easy to see without being seen. They were seated by the same window table. Clara looked excited, talking about something with her hands. Marcus looked a bit tired, distracted. Lisa came to me upstairs. "Your son is here again," she said quietly. "I see him," I replied. "Let them enjoy their lunch." She nodded. "Do you want me to comp their meal again?" "No," I said. "Let them pay this time." Lisa smiled. "Of course." I kept watching them for a moment. Marcus leaned toward Clara and said something that made her frown. Then she crossed her arms and looked away. Their conversation didn't seem light anymore. Sometimes, silence doesn't just reveal people, it changes them. The way they treat others, the way they carry their pride. It all shifts once they start realizing what they don't know. A few minutes later, I saw Mrs. Thompson walk in alone. She joined their table, looking sharp in a beige coat and pearls. She waved at a few other guests like she owned the place. Then something interesting happened. The waiter came over, carrying a tray of soup. He tripped slightly, just enough for a drop to spill on the corner of her coat. Mrs. Thompson's face turned red. "Can you people ever do your job right?" she snapped. The restaurant went quiet for a moment. Lisa walked up instantly, apologizing and offering to replace the dish. Mrs. Thompson shook her head and said, "This place used to be perfect. Now it's going downhill. Maybe the owner doesn't care anymore." I stood at the window, watching the scene below, the same arrogance, the same ignorance. But this time, it didn't bother me. It amused me. When they finished and left, Lisa came back upstairs. She looked upset. "I don't like the way she treats our staff," she said. "I know," I said. "But don't worry. Every person eventually meets their reflection." That evening, as I left the restaurant, I saw Marcus standing near the parking lot, talking to one of the chefs. I walked past quietly, but then I heard my name. "Wait," Marcus said, turning toward me. "Mom." I stopped and smiled. "Marcus, what a surprise." He looked confused. "You were here. What are you doing at this place?" "Just checking on a few things," I said. "You work here?" he asked. I paused, then said simply, "Something like that." He nodded slowly, unsure of what to say next. "The food here is incredible. Clara's parents keep talking about it." "I'm glad," I said. "They should appreciate good work." He smiled, then walked to his car. I could see curiosity growing in his eyes, but I didn't give him more. Some stories reveal themselves when the time is right. As I drove home, I felt something calm settle inside me. Revenge was already done. It didn't need a stage or an audience. It just needed peace. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything began to unravel. The restaurant was busier than usual, and I was reviewing monthly reports in my office upstairs. Lisa knocked on the door. "There's a man downstairs asking for you," she said. "He says his name is Daniel Parker." For a second, I froze. "My son." She nodded. I stood up slowly, trying to steady my breath. "Tell him I'll be right there." When I walked into the main hall, Daniel was standing near the entrance, looking around with confusion. He was holding his car keys, dressed in a business suit, completely out of place among the lunch crowd. "Mom," he said as soon as he saw me, "you own this place." I smiled gently. "Yes, Daniel, I do." He looked around again, as if trying to process it. "This whole restaurant, since when?" "Almost 15 years now," I replied. He blinked several times. "You mean, this is the restaurant everyone's talking about? The one Clara's dad wanted to invest in?" "Yes, that one." He rubbed his forehead. "You never told me. All these years, you acted like you barely made it through each month." I nodded. "Because you never asked. You assumed." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His voice softened. "Why would you hide something like this from me?" I looked at him carefully. "I didn't hide it, Daniel. I just didn't display it. There's a difference. You saw what you wanted to see. A simple woman. A background character in your life story." He stared at me, speechless. I continued. "Do you remember what you told me before that dinner? That your wife's parents thought I didn't have much. That you wanted me to fit in. You wanted me to be less than what I am." His eyes dropped to the floor. "Last week," I said, "I walked into that restaurant pretending to be poor, just to see how your wife's family would treat someone like me. They failed, Daniel. They failed miserably." He didn't defend them. He just stood there, pale, quiet. After a long pause, he said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how small I made you feel." I sighed. "It wasn't your words, son. It was your silence." For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of soft jazz playing in the background. Then, Daniel whispered, "Clara should know about this. She should know the truth." I shook my head. "No. Let her learn it in her own way. Just like you did." He looked at me one last time before saying, "I'll never see you the same way again." "That's the point," I said quietly. A week later, Clara called me. Her voice was tight but polite. "Hi, Mrs. Parker. My parents want to take you out to dinner again. They said they enjoyed last time." I smiled to myself. "Sure, Clara. Where should we meet?" She mentioned a fancy restaurant on the other side of town. I recognized the name. It was one of our competitors. I agreed anyway. Saturday night came, and I arrived early. This time, I wore a navy blue dress, my hair neatly done, simple diamond earrings, and a small leather handbag. I didn't look flashy, just elegant. I wanted them to see the same woman, but this time, without disguise. When I walked in, I saw their expressions freeze for a moment. Clara's eyes widened. Mrs. Thompson smiled awkwardly. "Oh, Mrs. Parker," she said, "you look different." "Do I?" I asked calmly as I sat down. "Maybe the lighting is better here." Mr. Thompson chuckled nervously. "Well, we're glad you came. We were just talking about that restaurant we went to last week. The food was outstanding. I've been thinking about reaching out to the owner." I looked at him. "You already did." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I own it," I said simply. The place you dined in last week belongs to me." The silence that followed was almost satisfying. Mrs. Thompson's smile disappeared. "You're joking, right?" "No, I'm not." I watched the color drain from her face. Clara looked at her husband, then at me, trying to piece it all together. I continued. "You didn't recognize me that night because I let you see what you wanted to see. A poor woman, someone beneath you. You treated me like I was lucky to be invited." Mrs. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to." I interrupted her softly. "You did, and it's fine. Because that night taught me something too. It reminded me why I never flaunt what I have. People don't respect wealth. They respect appearance. And that's their mistake, not mine." Clara looked down at her plate. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It's all right," I said. I wasn't angry. I just wanted to understand who I was really dealing with. The waiter came over to take our order. No one spoke for a full minute. When he left, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "That's very impressive, Mrs. Parker. You must be proud." "I am," I said. "But not for the money. For the silence." Dinner went on quietly after that. They tried to make small talk, but the mood had changed. There was no laughter this time, no soft insults hiding behind smiles. Just quiet respect or maybe fear. When the check came, Mr. Thompson reached for it. I stopped him gently. "This one's on me." He hesitated, then nodded. As I signed the bill, I felt something shift. The revenge wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about revelation. They had seen me for who I really was, and now they couldn't unsee it. The following week, Daniel came by my house again. This time, he brought Clara with him. She looked nervous, holding a small bouquet of flowers. I welcomed them in. "Come, sit down." Clara handed me the flowers. "I wanted to apologize," she said softly. "For everything?" I nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Daniel took a deep breath. "Mom, we talked a lot. About that night, about everything. I realize now that we let pride cloud our respect." I looked at both of them. "That's something everyone learns at their own pace." Clara said, "Your restaurant is amazing. My parents can't stop talking about how successful you are. My mom feels terrible." I smiled. "She'll be fine. People only grow when they're uncomfortable." Daniel looked thoughtful. "I used to think simplicity meant lack. Now I understand it means strength." "That's good, son," I said, "because life will test that belief again and again." We sat quietly for a while, sipping tea. The evening light filled the room, soft and golden. I looked at their faces, to people who had finally seen beyond appearances. As they got up to leave, Clara turned to me. "You really taught us a lesson." I smiled. "No, life did. I just gave it the stage." After they left, I walked out to my small garden. The wind was calm, the sky painted with sunset colors. I felt peaceful, not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. People think revenge is loud, but the most powerful kind is silent. It doesn't scream. It doesn't destroy, it simply reveals. And that night, under the fading light, I whispered to myself, "Let them see what dignity looks like." Then I smiled, walked back inside, and turned off the lights. The story was over. But the lesson would stay with them forever.